Section 4 of Idylls of the King. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. Idylls of the King by Alfred, Lord Tennyson. Section 4. The Marriage of Geraint. The brave Geraint, a knight of Arthur's court, a tributary prince of Devon, one of that great order of the Table Round, had married Enid, Einiol's only child, and loved her as he loved the light of heaven. And as the light of heaven varies, now at sunrise, now at sunset, now by night with moon and trembling stars, so loved Geraint to make her beauty vary day by day, in crimsons and in purples and in gems. And Enid, but to please her husband's eye, who first had found and loved her in a state of broken fortunes, daily fronted him in some fresh splendour. And the Queen herself, grateful to Prince Geraint for service done, loved her, and often with her own white hands arrayed and decked her, as the loveliest, next after her own self, in all the court. And Enid loved the Queen, and with true heart adored her as the stateliest and the best and loveliest of all women upon earth. And seeing them so tender and so close, long in their common love rejoiced Geraint. But when a rumour rose about the Queen, touching her guilty love for Lancelot, though yet there lived no proof, nor yet was heard the world's loud whisper breaking into storm, not less Geraint believed it. And there fell a horror on him, lest his gentle wife, through that great tenderness for Guinevere, had suffered, or should suffer, any taint in nature. Wherefore, going to the King, he made this pretext, that his princedom lay close on the borders of a territory, wherein were bandit earls and caitiff knights, assassins, and all flyers from the hand of justice, and whatever loathes a law. And therefore, till the King himself should please to cleanse this common sewer of all his realm, he craved a fair permission to depart, and there defend his marches. And the King mused for a little on his plea, but last, allowing it, the Prince and Enid rode, and 50 knights rode with them, to the shores of Severn, and they passed to their own land, where thinking that if ever yet was wife true to her lord, mine shall be so to me, he compassed her with sweet observances and worship, never leaving her, and grew forgetful of his promise to the King, forgetful of the falcon and the hunt, forgetful of the tilt and tournament, forgetful of his glory and his name, forgetful of his princedom and its cares. And this forgetfulness was hateful to her. And by the people, when they met in 2s and 3s or fuller companies, began to scoff and jeer and babble of him, as of a prince whose manhood was all gone, and molten down in mere uxoriousness. And this she gathered from the people's eyes, this too the women who attired her head, to please her, dwelling on his boundless love, told Enid, and they saddened her the more. And day by day she thought to tell Geraint, but could not out of bashful delicacy, while he that watched her sadden was the more suspicious that her nature had a taint. At last it chanced that on a summer morn, they sleeping each by either, the new sun beat through the blindless casement of the room, and heated the strong warrior in his dreams, who, moving, cast the coverlet aside, and bared the knotted column of his throat, the massive square of his heroic breast, and arms on which the standing muscle sloped, as slopes a wild brook o'er a little stone, running too vehemently to break upon it. And Enid woke and sat beside the couch, admiring him, and thought within herself, was ever man so grandly made as he? Then, like a shadow, passed the people's talk and accusation of uxoriousness across her mind, and bowing over him, low to her own heart piteously she said, O noble breast, and all puissant arms, am I the cause, I the poor cause that men reproach you, saying all your force is gone? I am the cause, because I dare not speak and tell him what I think and what they say. And yet I hate that he should linger here. I cannot love my lord, and not his name. Far liefer had I gird his harness on him, and ride with him to battle, and stand by, and watch his mightful hand striking great blows at caitiffs and wrongers of the world. Far better were I laid in the dark earth, not hearing any more his noble voice, not to be folded more in these dear arms, and darkened from the high light in his eyes, than that my lord through me should suffer shame. Am I so bold, and could I stand so by, and see my dear lord wounded in the strife, and maybe pierced to death before mine eyes, and yet not dare to tell him what I think, and how men slur him, saying all his force is melted into mere effeminacy? O me, I fear that I am no true wife." Half inwardly, half audibly she spoke, and the strong passion in her made her weep true tears upon his broad and naked breast, and these awoke him, and by great mischance he heard but fragments of her later words, and that she feared she was not a true wife. And then he thought, in spite of all my care, for all my pains, poor man, for all my pains, she is not faithful to me, and I see her weeping for some gay knight in Arthur's hall. Then, though he loved and reverenced her too much to dream she could be guilty of foul act, right through his manful breast darted the pang that makes a man, in the sweet face of her whom he loves most, lonely and miserable. At this he hurled his huge limbs out of bed, and shook his drowsy squire awake, and cried, "My charger and her palfrey!" Then to her, "I will ride forth into the wilderness, for though it seems my spurs are yet to win, I have not fallen so low as some would wish. And thou, put on thy worst and meanest dress, and ride with me." And Enid asked amazed, "If Enid errs, let Enid learn her fault." But he, "I charge thee, ask not, but obey." Then she bethought her of a faded silk, a faded mantle, and a faded veil, and moving toward a cedern cabinet wherein she kept them folded reverently, with sprigs of summer laid between the folds, she took them and arrayed herself therein, remembering when first he came on her dressed in that dress, and how he loved her in it, and all her foolish fears about the dress, and all his journey to her, as himself had told her, and their coming to the court. For Arthur on the Whitsuntide before held court at old Caerleon upon Usk. There on a day, he sitting high in hall, before him came a forester of Dean, wet from the woods, with notice of a hart taller than all his fellows, milky white, first seen that day. These things he told the king. Then the good king gave order to let blow his horns for hunting on the morrow morn. And when the king petitioned for his leave to see the hunt, allowed it easily. So with the morning all the court were gone. But Guinevere lay late into the morn, lost in sweet dreams, and dreaming of her love for Lancelot, and forgetful of the hunt; but rose at last, a single maiden with her, took horse, and forded Usk, and gained the wood. There, on a little knoll beside it, stayed waiting to hear the hounds, but heard instead a sudden sound of hoofs, for Prince Geraint, late also, wearing neither hunting dress nor weapon, save a golden-hilted brand, came quickly flashing through the shallow ford behind them, and so galloped up the knoll. A purple scarf at either end whereof there swung an apple of the purest gold, swayed round about him, as he galloped up to join them, glancing like a dragon-fly in summer suit and silks of holiday. Low bowed the tributary prince, and she, sweet and stately, and with all grace of womanhood and queenhood, answered him. "Late, late, Sir Prince," she said, "later than we." "Yes, noble queen," he answered, "and so late that I but come like you to see the hunt, not join it." "Therefore wait with me," she said, "for on this little knoll, if anywhere, there is good chance that we shall hear the hounds. Here often they break covert at our feet." And while they listened for the distant hunt, and chiefly for the baying of Cavil, King Arthur's hound of deepest mouth, there rode full slowly by a knight, lady, and dwarf. whereof the dwarf lagged latest, and the knight had visor up, and showed a youthful face, imperious and of haughtiest lineaments. And Guinevere, not mindful of his face in the king's hall, desired his name, and sent her maiden to demand it of the dwarf, who, being vicious, old, and irritable, and doubling all his master's vice of pride, made answer sharply that she should not know. "Then will I ask it of himself," she cried. "Nay, by my faith, thou shalt not," cried the dwarf. "Thou art not worthy even to speak of him." And when she put her horse toward the knight, struck at her with his whip, and she returned indignant to the queen. Whereat Geraint, exclaiming, "Surely I will learn the name," made sharply to the dwarf and asked it of him, who answered as before. And when the prince had put his horse in motion toward the knight, struck at him with his whip and cut his cheek. The prince's blood spurted upon the scarf, dyeing it, and his quick instinctive hand caught at the hilt as to abolish him. But he, from his exceeding manfulness and pure nobility of temperament, wroth to be wroth at such a worm, refrained from even a word, and so returning said, "I will avenge this insult, noble queen, done in your maiden's person to yourself, and I will track this vermin to their earths, for though I ride unarmed, I do not doubt to find, at some place I shall come at, arms on loan, or else for pledge, and being found, then will I fight him, and will break his pride, and on the third day will again be here, so that I be not fallen in fight. Farewell." "Farewell, fair prince," answered the stately queen. "Be prosperous in this journey as in all, and may you light on all things that you love, and live to wed with her whom first you love. But ere you wed with any, bring your bride, and I, were she the daughter of a king, yea, though she were a beggar from the hedge, will clothe her for her bridals like the sun." And Prince Geraint, now thinking that he heard the noble hart at bay, now the far horn, a little vexed at losing of the hunt, a little at the vile occasion, rode, by ups and downs through many a grassy glade and valley, with fixed eye following the three. At last they issued from the world of wood, and climbed upon a fair and even ridge, and showed themselves against the sky, and sank. And thither there came Geraint, and underneath beheld the long street of a little town in a long valley, on one side whereof, white from the mason's hand, a fortress rose, and on one side a castle in decay, beyond a bridge that spanned a dry ravine, and out of town and valley came a noise as of a broad brook or a shingly bed brawling, or like a clamour of the rooks at distance, ere they settle for the night. And onward to the fortress rode the three, and entered, and were lost behind the walls. So, thought Geraint, I have tracked him to his earth. And down the long street riding wearily, found every hostel full, and everywhere was hammer laid to hoof, and the hot hiss and bustling whistle of the youth who scoured his master's armour, and of such a one he asked, "What means the tumult in the town?" Who told him, scouring still, "The sparrow-hawk." Then, riding close behind an ancient churl, who, smitten by the dusty sloping beam, went sweating underneath a sack of corn, asked yet once more what meant the hubbub here. Who answered gruffly, "Ugh, the sparrow-hawk." Then, riding further past an armourer's, who, with back turned and bowed above his work, sat riveting a helmet on his knee, he put the self-same query, but the man, not turning round nor looking at him, said, "Friend, he that labours for the sparrow-hawk has little time for idle questioners." Whereat Geraint flashed into sudden spleen. "A thousand pips eat up your sparrow-hawk! Tits rend and all winged nothings peck him dead. Ye think the rustic cackle of your burg the murmur of the world? What is it to me? A wretched set of sparrows one and all, who pipe of nothing but of sparrow-hawks. Speak, if ye be not like the rest, hawk-mad. Where can I get me harbourage for the night? And arms, arms, arms to fight mine enemy? Speak!" Whereat the armourer, turning all amazed, and seeing one so gay in purple silks, came forward with the helmet yet in hand, and answered, "Pardon me, O stranger knight, we hold a tourney here to-morrow morn, and there is scantly time for half the work. Arms? Truth, I know not, all are wanted here.
Harbourage? Truth, good truth, I know not, save it may be at Earl Eniol's over the bridge yonder." He spoke, and fell to work again. Then rode Geraint, a little spleenful yet, across the bridge that spanned the dry ravine. There musing sat the hoary-headed Earl, his dress a suit of frayed magnificence, once fit for feasts of ceremony, and said, "Whither, fair son?" To whom Geraint replied, "O friend, I seek a harbourage for the night." Then Eniol, "Enter therefore and partake the slender entertainment of a house once rich, now poor, but ever open-doored." "Thanks, venerable friend," replied Geraint. "So that ye do not serve me sparrow-hawks for supper, I will enter, I will eat with all the passion of a 12 hours' fast." Then sighed and smiled the hoary-headed Earl, and answered, "Graver cause than yours is mine to curse this hedgerow thief, the sparrow-hawk. But in, go in, for save yourself desire it, we will not touch upon him even in jest." Then rode Geraint into the castle court, his charger trampling many a prickly star of sprouted thistle on the broken stones. He looked and saw that all was ruinous. Here stood a shattered archway plumed with fern, and here had fallen a great part of a tower, whole, like a crag that tumbles from the cliff, and like a crag was gay with wilding flowers, and high above a piece of turret stair, worn by the feet that now were silent, wound bare to the sun, and monstrous ivy stems clasped the grey walls with hairy fibred arms, and sucked the joining of the stones, and looked a knot beneath of snakes aloft a grove. And while he waited in the castle court, the voice of Enid, Eniol's daughter, rang clear through the open casement of the hall, singing. And as the sweet voice of a bird, heard by the lander in a lonely isle, moves him to think what kind of bird it is that sings so delicately clear, and make conjecture of the plumage and the form, so the sweet voice of Enid moved Geraint, and made him like a man abroad at morn, when first the liquid note beloved of men comes flying over many a windy wave to Britain, and in April suddenly breaks from a coppice gemmed with green and red, and he suspends his converse with a friend, or it may be the labour of his hands, to think or say, "There is the Nightingale." So fared it with Geraint, who thought and said, "Here by God's grace is the one voice for me." It chanced the song that Enid sang was one of Fortune and her wheel, and Enid sang: "Turn, Fortune, turn thy wheel and lower the proud, turn thy wild wheel through sunshine, storm, and cloud, thy wheel and thee we neither love nor hate. Turn, Fortune, turn thy wheel with smile or frown, with that wild wheel we go not up or down, our hoard is little, but our hearts are great. Smile and we smile, the lords of many lands, frown and we smile, the lords of our own hands, for man is man and master of his fate. Turn, turn thy wheel above the staring crowd, thy wheel and thou are shadows in the cloud, thy wheel and thee we neither love nor hate." "Hark, by the bird's song ye may learn the nest," said Eniol. "Enter quickly." Entering then, right o'er a mount of newly fallen stones, the dusky raftered many cobwebbed hall, he found an ancient dame in dim brocade, and near her, like a blossom vermeil white that lightly breaks a faded flower sheath, moved the fair Enid, all in faded silk, her daughter. In a moment thought Geraint, here by God's rood is the one maid for me. But none spake word except the hoary earl. "Enid, the good knight's horse stands in the court. Take him to stall and give him corn, and then go to the town and buy us flesh and wine, and we will make us merry as we may. Our hoard is little, but our hearts are great." He spake. The prince, as Enid passed him, feigned to follow, strode astride, but Eniol caught his purple scarf and held and said, "Forbear, rest, the good house, though ruined, O my son, endures not that her guest should serve himself." And reverencing the custom of the house, Geraint from utter courtesy forbore. So Enid took his charger to the stall, and after went her way across the bridge, and reached the town, And while the prince and earl yet spoke together, came again with one, a youth, that following with a costrel bore the means of goodly welcome, flesh and wine. And Enid brought sweet cakes to make them cheer, and in her veil enfolded manchet bread. And then, because their hall must also serve for kitchen, boiled the flesh and spread the board, and stood behind and waited on the three. And seeing her so sweet and serviceable, Geraint had longing in him evermore to stoop and kiss the tender little thumb that crossed the trencher as she laid it down. But after all had eaten, then Geraint, for now the wine made summer in his veins, let his eye rove in following, or rest on Enid at her lowly handmaid work, now here, now there, about the dusky hall. Then suddenly addressed the hoary earl. "Fair host and earl, I pray your courtesy. This Sparrow-hawk, what is he? Tell me of him. His name? But no, good faith, I will not have it, for if he be the knight whom late I saw ride into that new fortress by your town, white from the mason's hand, then have I sworn from his own lips to have it. I am Geraint of Devon, for this morning, when the queen sent her own maiden to demand the name, his dwarf, a vicious undershapen thing, struck at her with his whip, and she returned indignant to the queen. And then I swore that I would track this caitiff to his hold, and fight and break his pride, and have it of him. And all unarmed I rode, and thought to find arms in your town, where all the men are mad. They take the rustic murmur of their burg for the great wave that echoes round the world. They would not hear me speak. But if ye know where I can light on arms, or if yourself should have them, tell me, seeing I have sworn that I will break his pride and learn his name, avenging this great insult done the queen." Then cried Earl Iniol, "Art thou he indeed, Geraint? A name far sounded among men for noble deeds? And truly I, when first I saw you moving by me on the bridge, felt ye were somewhat, yea, and by your state and presence might have guessed you one of those that eat in Arthur's hall in Camelot. Nor speak I now from foolish flattery, for this dear child had often heard me praise your feats of arms, and often when I paused hath asked again, and ever loved to hear. So grateful is the noise of noble deeds to noble hearts who see but acts of wrong. Oh, never yet had woman such a pair of suitors as this maiden. First Limor, a creature wholly given to brawls and wine, drunk even when he wooed, and be he dead I know not, but he passed to the wild land. The second was your foe, the Sparrow-hawk, my curse, my nephew, I will not let his name slip from my lips if I can help it. He, when that I knew him fierce and turbulent, refused her to him, then his pride awoke. And since the proud man often is the mean, he sowed a slander in the common ear, affirming that his father left him gold, and in my charge, which was not rendered to him. Bribed with large promises the men who served about my person, the more easily because my means were somewhat broken into through open doors and hospitality, raised my own town against me in the night before my Enid's birthday, sacked my house, from mine own earldom foully ousted me, built that new fort to overawe my friends, for truly there are those who love me yet, and keeps me in this ruinous castle here, where doubtless he would put me soon to death, but that his pride too much despises me. And I myself sometimes despise myself, for I have let men be and have their way, am much too gentle, have not used my power, nor know I whether I be very base or very manful, whether very wise or very foolish. Only this I know, that whatsoever evil happen to me, I seem to suffer nothing heart or limb, but can endure it all most patiently." "Well said, true heart," replied Geraint. "But arms, that if the Sparrow-hawk this nephew fight in next day's tourney, I may break his pride." And Iniol answered, "Arms indeed, but old and rusty, Prince Geraint, are mine, and therefore at thy asking thine. But in this tournament can no man tilt, except the lady he loves best be there. 2 forks are fixed into the meadow ground, and over these is placed a silver wand, and over that a golden Sparrow-hawk, the prize of beauty for the fairest there. And this what knight soever be in field lays claim to for the lady at his side, and tilts with my good nephew thereupon, who, being apt at arms and big of bone, has ever won it for the lady with him, and toppling over all antagonism, has earned himself the name of Sparrow-hawk. But thou that hast no lady canst not fight." To whom Geraint, with eyes all bright, replied, leaning a little toward him, "Thy leave, let me lay lance in rest, O noble host, for this dear child, because I never saw, though having seen all beauties of our time, nor can see elsewhere anything so fair. And if I fall, her name will yet remain untarnished as before. But if I live, so aid me heaven when at mine uttermost, as I will make her truly my true wife." Then, howsoever patient, Einiol's heart danced in his bosom, seeing better days, and looking round he saw not Enid there, who, hearing her own name, had stolen away, but that old dame, to whom full tenderly, and folding all her hand in his, he said, "Mother, a maiden is a tender thing, and best by her that bore her understood. Go thou to rest, but ere thou go to rest, tell her, and prove her heart toward the prince." So spake the kindly-hearted earl, and she with frequent smile and nod departing found, half disarrayed as to her rest, the girl, whom first she kissed on either cheek, and then on either shining shoulder laid a hand, and kept her off, and gazed upon her face, and told them all their converse in the hall, proving her heart. But never light and shade coursed one another more on open ground beneath a troubled heaven, than red and pale across the face of Enid hearing her, while slowly falling as a scale that falls when weight is added only grain by grain, sank her sweet head upon her gentle breast, nor did she lift an eye nor speak a word, wrapped in the fear and in the wonder of it. So moving without answer to her rest, she found no rest, and ever failed to draw the quiet night into her blood, but lay contemplating her own unworthiness. And when the pale and bloodless east began to quicken to the sun, arose, and raised her mother too, and hand in hand they moved down to the meadow where the jousts were held, and waited there for Einiol and Geraint. And thither came the twain, and when Geraint beheld her first in field awaiting him, he felt, were she the prize of bodily force, himself beyond the rest pushing could move the chair of Idris. Einiol's rusted arms were on his princely person, but through these princelike his bearing shone, and errant knights and ladies came, and by the town flowed in, and settling circled all the lists. And there they fixed the forks into the ground, and over these they placed the silver wand, and over that the golden sparrow-hawk. Then Einiol's nephew, after trumpet blown, spake to the lady with him, and proclaimed, "Advance and take, as fairest of the fair, what I these 2 years past have won for thee, the prize of beauty." Loudly spake the prince, "Forbear, there is a worthier." And the knight, with some surprise and thrice as much disdain, turned, and beheld the four, and all his face glowed like the heart of a great fire at Yule, so burnt he was with passion, crying out, "Do battle for it, then." No more. And thrice they clashed together, and thrice they brake their spears. Then each dishorsed and drawing lashed at each other so often and with such blows that all the crowd wondered, and now and then from distant walls there came a clapping as of phantom hands. So twice they fought and twice they breathed, and still the dew of their great labour and the blood of their strong bodies flowing drained their force. But either's force was matched till Einiol's cry, "Remember that great insult done the queen," increased Geraint's, who heaved his blade aloft and cracked the helmet through and bit the bone and felled him, and set foot upon his breast and said, "Thy name?" To whom the fallen man made answer, groaning, "Edern, son of Nud." "Ashamed am I that I should tell it thee. My pride is broken, men have seen my fall." "Then, Edern, son of Nud," replied Geraint, "these 2 things shalt thou do, or else thou diest. First, thou thyself with damsel and with dwarf shalt ride to Arthur's court, and coming there crave pardon for that insult done the queen, and shalt abide her judgment on it. Next thou shalt give back their earldom to thy kin. These 2 things shalt thou do, or thou shalt die." And Edern answered, "These things will I do, For I have never yet been overthrown, and thou hast overthrown me, and my pride is broken down, for Enid sees my fall." And rising up, he rode to Arthur's court, and there the Queen forgave him easily. And being young, he changed, and came to loathe his crime of traitor, slowly drew himself bright from his old dark life, and fell at last in the great battle fighting for the King. But when the third day from the hunting morn made a low splendour in the world, and wings moved in her ivy, Enid, for she lay with her fair head in the dim yellow light, among the dancing shadows of the birds, woke and bethought her of her promise given no later than last eve to Prince Geraint. So bent he seemed on going the third day he would not leave her, till her promise given, to ride with him this morning to the court, and there be made known to the stately Queen, and there be wedded with all ceremony. At this she cast her eyes upon her dress, and thought it never yet had looked so mean. For as a leaf in mid-November is to what it is in mid-October, seemed the dress that now she looked on to the dress she looked on ere the coming of Geraint. And still she looked, and still the terror grew of that strange, bright, and dreadful thing, a court, all staring at her in her faded silk, and softly to her own sweet heart she said, "This noble prince, who won our earldom back, so splendid in his acts and his attire, sweet heaven, how much I shall discredit him! Would he could tarry with us here awhile, but being so beholden to the prince, it were but little grace in any of us, bent as he seemed on going this third day, to seek a second favour at his hands. Yet if he could but tarry a day or two, myself would work eye dim and finger lame, far liefer than so much discredit him." And Enid fell in longing for a dress all branched and flowered with gold, a costly gift of her good mother, given her on the night before her birthday, 3 sad years ago, that night of fire, when Edairn sacked their house, and scattered all they had to all the winds. For while the mother showed it, and the two were turning and admiring it, the work to both appeared so costly, rose a cry that Edairn's men were on them, and they fled with little save the jewels they had on, which being sold and sold had bought them bread, and Edairn's men had caught them in their flight, and placed them in this ruin, and she wished the prince had found her in her ancient home. Then let her fancy flit across the past, and roam the goodly places that she knew, and last bethought her how she used to watch, near that old home, a pool of golden carp, and one was patched and blurred and lustreless among his burnished brethren of the pool, and half asleep she made comparison of that and these to her own faded self and the gay court, and fell asleep again, and dreamt herself was such a faded form among her burnished sisters of the pool. But this was in the garden of a king, and though she lay dark in the pool, she knew that all was bright, that all about were birds of sunny plume and gilded trellis work, that all the turf was rich in plots that looked each like a garnet or a turkis in it, and lords and ladies of the high court went in silver tissue talking things of state, and children of the king in cloth of gold glanced at the doors or gambolled down the walks. And while she thought, "They will not see me," came a stately queen whose name was Guinevere, and all the children in their cloth of gold ran to her, crying, "If we have fish at all, let them be gold, and charge the gardeners now to pick the faded creature from the pool, and cast it on the mixen that it die." And therewithal one came and seized on her, and Enid started waking, with her heart all overshadowed by the foolish dream, and lo, it was her mother grasping her to get her well awake, and in her hand a suit of bright apparel, which she laid flat on the couch, and spoke exultingly. "See here, my child, how fresh the colours look, how fast they hold like colours of a shell that keeps the wear and polish of the wave. Why not? It never yet was worn, I trow. Look on it, child, and tell me if ye know it." And Enid looked, but all confused at first, could scarce divide it from her foolish dream. Then suddenly she knew it and rejoiced, and answered, "Yea, I know it. Your good gift, so sadly lost on that unhappy night, your own good gift." "Yea, surely," said the dame, "and gladly given again this happy morn. For when the jousts were ended yesterday, went Inyal through the town, and everywhere he found the sack and plunder of our house all scattered through the houses of the town, and gave command that all which once was ours should now be ours again. And yester eve, while ye were talking sweetly with your prince, came one with this and laid it in my hand, for love or fear, or seeking favour of us, because we have our earldom back again. And yester eve I would not tell you of it, but kept it for a sweet surprise at morn. Yea, truly, is it not a sweet surprise? For I myself unwillingly have worn my faded suit, as you, my child, have yours, and howsoever patient, Inyol his. Ah, dear, he took me from a goodly house, with store of rich apparel, sumptuous fare, and page and maid, and squire and seneschal, and pastime both of hawk and hound, and all that appertains to noble maintenance. Yea, and he brought me to a goodly house. But since our fortune swerved from sun to shade, and all through that young traitor, cruel need constrained us. But a better time has come. So clothe yourself in this, that better fits our mended fortunes and a prince's bride. For though ye won the prize of fairest fair, and though I heard him call you fairest fair, let never maiden think, however fair, she is not fairer in new clothes than old. And should some great court lady say, the prince hath picked a ragged robin from the hedge, and like a madman brought her to the court, then were ye shamed, and worse might shame the prince to whom we are beholden. But I know that when my dear child is set forth in her best, that neither court nor country, though they sought through all the provinces like those of old that lighted on Queen Esther, has her match." Here ceased the kindly mother, out of breath, and Enid listened brightening as she lay. Then, as the white and glittering star of morn parts from a bank of snow, and by slips into golden cloud, the maiden arose, and left her maiden couch, and robed herself, helped by the mother's careful hand and eye, without a mirror in the gorgeous gown. Who after turned her daughter round and said, she never yet had seen her half so fair, and called her like that maiden in the tale, whom Gwydion made by glamour out of flowers, and sweeter than the bride of Cassivelon, Fleur, for whose love the Roman Caesar first invaded Britain. But we beat him back, as this great prince invaded us, and we, not beat him back, but welcomed him with joy, and I can scarcely ride with you to court, for old am I, and rough the ways and wild. But Inyol goes, and I full oft shall dream I see my princess as I see her now, clothed with my gift, and gay among the gay. But while the women thus rejoiced, Geraint woke where he slept in the high hall, and called for Enid. And when Inyol made report of that good mother making Enid gay in such apparel as might well beseem his princess, or indeed the stately queen, he answered, "Earl, entreat her by my love, albeit I give no reason but my wish, that she ride with me in her faded silk." Inyol with that hard message went. It fell like flaws in summer laying lusty corn, for Enid, all abashed she knew not why, dared not to glance at her good mother's face, but silently, in all obedience, her mother silent too, nor helping her, laid from her limbs the costly broidered gift, and robed them in her ancient suit again, and so descended. Never man rejoiced more than Geraint to greet her thus attired, and glancing all at once as keenly at her as careful robins eye the delver's toil, made her cheek burn and either eyelid fall, but rested with her sweet face satisfied. Then seeing cloud upon the mother's brow, her by both hands she caught, and sweetly said, "O my new mother, be not wroth or grieved at thy new son, for my petition to her. When late I left Caerleon, our great queen, in words whose echo lasts, they were so sweet, made promise that whatever bride I brought, herself would clothe her like the sun in heaven. Thereafter, when I reached this ruined hall, beholding one so bright in dark estate, I vowed that I could gain her, our fair queen, no hand but hers, should make your Enid burst sun-like from cloud. And likewise thought, perhaps, that service done so graciously would bind the two together. Fain I would the two should love each other. How can Enid find a nobler friend? Another thought was mine. I came among you here so suddenly, that though her gentle presence at the lists might well have served for proof that I was loved, I doubted whether daughter's tenderness, or easy nature, might not let itself be moulded by your wishes for her weal, or whether some false sense in her own self of my contrasting brightness overbore her fancy dwelling in this dusky hall, and such a sense might make her long for court and all its perilous glories. And I thought that I could some way prove such force in her, linked with such love for me, that at a word, no reason given her, she could cast aside a splendour dear to women, new to her, and therefore dearer; or if not so new, yet therefore tenfold dearer by the power of intermitted usage. Then I felt that I could rest, a rock in ebbs and flows, fixed on her faith. Now therefore I do rest, a prophet certain of my prophecy, that never shadow of mistrust can cross between us. Grant me pardon for my thoughts, and for my strange petition I will make amends hereafter by some gaudy day, when your fair child shall wear your costly gift beside your own warm hearth, with on her knees, who knows, another gift of the high God, which maybe shall have learned to lisp you thanks." He spoke. The mother smiled, but half in tears, then brought a mantle down and wrapped her in it, and clasped and kissed her, and they rode away. Now thrice that morning Guinevere had climbed the giant tower, from whose high crest, they say, men saw the goodly hills of Somerset, and white sails flying on the yellow sea. But not to goodly hill or yellow sea looked the fair queen, but up the vale of Usk, by the flat meadow, till she saw them come, and then descending met them at the gates, embraced her with all welcome as a friend, and did her honour as the prince's bride, and clothed her for her bridals like the sun, and all that week was old Caerleon gay, for by the hands of Dubric the high saint they twain were wedded with all ceremony. And this was on the last year's Whitsuntide. But Enid ever kept the faded silk, remembering how first he came on her, dressed in that dress, and how he loved her in it, and all her foolish fears about the dress, and all his journey toward her, as himself had told her, and their coming to the court. And now this morning when he said to her, "Put on your worst and meanest dress," she found and took it, and arrayed herself therein. End of Section 4.